Our life is often defined by our core values. And our core values originate typically when we're younger. They're given to us by mentors, by parents, by grandparents, by teachers, coaches. And understanding your core values is important because core values are like magnets. They either snap us together or they repel us. No matter how much you turn a magnet against itself, it always repels. If you ever wondered why you walk into a room and you're just not sure why you don't connect with someone, oftentimes it's tied to a distinct core value that doesn't align with each other. My core values are honesty, integrity, passion. I'm very specific and committed to those things. But there's also aspirational values. And those are the things that you can aspire to change, you can intently change, but they don't always come natural to you. And so while my core values are really honesty, integrity, passion, honesty is more about this adherence and passion for truth, information. Integrity is about doing the right thing when no one's looking. It's about self-governance. Passion is really about a pursuit of something, not allowing life to happen to you, but you happening to life. And so then I have this whole list of aspirational values. Well, it's funny because I think our core values are given to us by influential people in our lives. And one of the most influential people in my life, or influential persons in my life, is my father. And the one core value I wish would have passed on to me that is so much a part of who he is that of generosity. He's a giver. And I've watched him so many times wad up amount of, a grouping of cash and give it to someone without everyone knowing. And I've watched him do it so many times, whether it was to a missionary or to homeless. If he found someone in need, it was just part of who he was. It's his core value. For me, it's an aspirational value. It's something I aspire to be. So I have to be intentional about it. So even though it's not something I naturally do, I don't walk by, I'm so singularly focused that I'll miss a homeless person. And it's not because I don't want to help. It's because I'm typically just focused on everything else. So I have to create awareness in my life to allow that aspirational value to be a part of, how I act. Because my core values come out naturally. My aspirational values, you have to be intentional. I have to be very intentional about. And I think it's important to not just understand your core values. I think it's very important to understand your aspirational values because you have to actually intentionally insert them into your life. And so for me, generosity is one of those aspirational values. And while I have a very large nonprofit, I spend my life giving back to others. It has to be intentional because if I'm not intentional about that, I naturally just get locked in on what I typically am doing, which is pursuing businesses or growth or scale. And so as I define generosity in my life with intentionality, I believe that generosity is very misunderstood. Because I think generosity is oftentimes about just giving to someone in need. And while that maybe is a portion of generosity, I think true generosity is actually giving out of your own poverty. I believe that there's two areas of your life that you exist in. You exist in areas of poverty and areas of abundance. So while I was younger, to give someone $1 when I didn't have it would have been giving out of my poverty. And to me, that's true generosity. Today, while I've had some success and I have money that I could give away, to just give dollars away oftentimes is a way for us to appease our conscience, but not truly be generous. Back when I had time and no money, it would have been easier for me to serve and to give time away. And that would have been what I have an abundance of. And oftentimes we appease our conscience for whatever reason by giving out of our abundance. I believe that true poverty is actually or true generosity is actually giving out of your poverty. So as I've switched kind of my places in life, I think that I really am gauging my motives of if this aspirational value is true generosity. That's what I want to be every day on a consistent basis, truly generous. What I have to do is actually look at the areas where there are poverty in my life, and I have to intentionally give out of those areas because that's where the true heart of generosity springs from. So for me today, it is time. The resource of time is the most valuable thing I have. It's so precious and also commoditized. Every single piece, it's fractionalized down to the very moment. That for me to even section off a piece of time to give back is so difficult. But on the other side of giving out of poverty, it becomes one of the most fulfilling things I do. If I walk by and I give a homeless person $100, if I would have done that in my 20s, it I would have felt amazing about it. Today, I give $100 and I wouldn't even think about it. I would just probably, it would go out of my mind. And, while that would come across as generous to everyone watching, to me, it would actually be disingenuous to my true purpose, which is generosity, because what I did was I gave something that I didn't place value on. I didn't place as much value on. However, if I sat down and I spent time with someone, I shut down my busy schedule and I chose to impart wisdom or knowledge or some sort of truth, that is what I have the least amount of resources for. And so therefore the fulfillment comes in a greater place. And so if you struggle to find fulfillment in your life, you have to actually look for areas of poverty to determine if you're willing to truly be generous and give of that. And I can tell you that it really is the most fulfilling thing I do. It's not giving money to a foreign country to dig a well. It's going to the well. Dan Fleischman, my business partner, often talks about, he says, when he talks about me or he introduces me, he's like, Eddie is the guy that's not just giving, he's the guy that's actually going. Like, he'll help build the park. And the reason I go build the park, or the reason I go roll up my sleeves and work with locals in different countries, is because I know that is truly where fulfillment happens. Standing next to someone giving something that I have so little of is where true fulfillment happens in my life. I think that this principle is biblical in nature. You go back to the woman who gave the widow's mite, and it's kind of that concept of the widow's mite. And everyone looked around and saw her kind of throw her, small amount of money in the pot as a donation, and everyone looked around and thought that's so insignificant. But Jesus talked about how that was the greatest gift that was given. And again, it's because he valued our ability to give out of our poverty, because when you have little and you give much, that is something that is unmistakably generous. For me, I think that I've always known that concept. I don't think I understood that concept until later. While I may have been taught that early, it wasn't until I would find myself giving money, or someone would ask me something. They would say, hey, would you be willing to donate to this? Or would you be willing to? And I would watch, if somebody ever asked me for money, I would just give money. And that was easy. And really, I didn't feel great about it. However, if somebody actually convinced me to go spend time, which I was so resistant to, I would always just give time. I would always give money instead of time, because it was the easier gift. It was the thing I had abundance of. That I began to realize, I'm number one, I'm super stingy with my time, and I should be more conscious about where I could spend my time in service of others. But then also, when someone would actually convince me to do it and I would do it, the amount of fulfillment and gratitude and, love that I would feel towards those people, or towards myself, or towards my surroundings, the gratitude I would have for the place in life I was at, it all changed. And so I almost would feel guilty by just giving the thing that I had the most of. And so it really wasn't until, probably a few years ago that I really dissected that down in my life and thought, this is, if I'm actually chasing fulfillment, if I actually want to find true joy, it's not going to be at the end of giving what I have a lot of. That's easy. Anyone can do that. That isn't joy. It's just it's a token. It's throwing it in. It's the same person would have walked by and threw their mite in, and they had such abundance. The whole point of that story was that the widow, she had nothing, and she gave everything she had. And so if you struggle with something that you lack today, I'm not a super creative guy. I'm not great at construction work. I can't give of my talents in that area because I don't have a lot of talents in that area. Where I have talents is in the concepts of the business world, understanding and structuring businesses, understanding operations, to go down to Mexico or Nigeria or Pakistan and sit down for a day or two or three and show them how to run a business, show them how to exponentially grow, is what I have a gift in. And time is my greatest restraint to doing that. But I will tell you that when I do that, I feel the most fulfillment.
If we were to continue on looking at this through a biblical lens, I think sacrifice is an eternal principle.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about, what are you willing to put on the altar of sacrifice?
Sure.
And I think it's the same message, just worded differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sacrifice is one of those things that many people will talk about and very few people will intentionally do. One of my favorite podcast questions, if I'm asking someone or interview questions, is I believe that all success comes on the other end of sacrifice. And so you either intentionally sacrifice to get here or you unintentionally sacrifice. Something happened, but something catapulted you to whatever you are, successful at today. And I think what's missed in that concept is we look back and we think, well, everything great came on the other side of something bad happening to you. What happens if you intentionally sacrificed? What if you chose to sacrifice long before it was required of you to actually get to a place of success? I think the principle still works, still rings true. If you're willing to sacrifice money or hard work or effort or stress, it's like comparable to that is, if you want to get strong, you have to have resistance. You have to lift weight, right? And the more resistance, the more strength you gain. And I think strength is the resistance. Sacrifice is the resistance. If you choose to sacrifice, it's like creating a resistance that allows you to build muscle in certain areas that then allows you to find the success that you ultimately want. Most people just don't intentionally sacrifice.
There is a pattern of people reaching the end of their life where they say something to the effect of, oh, I wish I hadn't worked this hard, or I wish I had spent more time with family, etc. But if the principle of sacrifice rings true, it's like, is there right seasons to sacrifice time, relationships to get the reward at the end? Is there a balance? Is it different for everyone?
That's the hardest question to ask an entrepreneur is, what's the right balance of sacrifice and giving to your family and everything like that. And I would say that it's one of the areas I struggle with the most is what is the right balance? To be honest with you, I hate the concept of work-life balance. Like I love work. And so anytime that somebody brings up that concept, I feel shamed. Like, well, I probably work a whole lot more than I, find fun times in my life, but I find work to be fun and gratifying and everything else. I think a lot of that's perception. And one of the big beliefs that I have, and again, everyone has this kind of direction they're going, especially in child rearing, that they just hope rings true. And you really don't know if it rings true until you get to the place where your children are adults. And then you find out, it's one of life's great mysteries. But I believe, one of my core beliefs, that we will find out. We'll find out in 20 years, if my belief rings true, is that I believe every child deserves to watch their parents chase their dreams. And I think that in chasing our dreams, we actually instill something greater in our children than just spending time with them. I think that there's a lot of misnomers in that. I think that sometimes we put so much emphasis on attending a baseball game or a basketball game, being at a play or a pageant. And I think that one thing that I watched my father do very, very well was he showed up in the important moments of my life. He wasn't in all the moments of my life. He wasn't at every basketball game or every football game. But he was there, and he was there in those important moments. But I also watched my dad chase his dreams, and it was in chasing his dreams it gave me the resilience and the passion, the desire, and the belief that I could chase mine with reckless abandon. That was the greatest gift that my dad ever gave me, was chasing his dreams. It wasn't time, it was. He always let me in his world. He never shielded me from his world. There was never an off limits. If I wanted to come into his world, he wasn't like with his buddies and I wasn't allowed to participate. He wasn't at work and I couldn't show up. I could show up anywhere that my dad was and he would be happy to have me. And he'd probably put me to work no matter what the situation was. But I loved that his worlds were never segregated. His worlds were very much all together and his world was work. And man, what a great gift that was to me as I began to start chasing my dreams. But again, you have to face all of that. I have guilt over missing certain things of my children, and you have to ask my children if they feel bad about things I've missed. But I'm hoping to give them the same gift, a dad that chased his dreams with just reckless abandon while trying to be very present in their lives.
Going back to examples of giving out of your poverty, is there any specific stories that come to your mind that were kind of pivotal or helped formulate that belief?
Yeah. As I began to build the nonprofit, I always felt like my greatest gift to the nonprofit would always be resources, capital. So for the first many years of it, I would just build businesses, make money, sell businesses, give money. And in the early days, I had to go set everything up. So I was in the foreign, countries quite a bit. I would go overseas, I'd spend time, I'd build the relationships. And then I'd kind of farm those relationships off to the people that worked for me, the regional directors or people that were here in the States. And then I would just focus on the money part, just give money, give money, give money. And thinking that that was the greatest contribution I could make. While it was important, I mean, it needed the money to succeed and to grow and thrive. I was in Mexico with Sam Robles, who, we've featured, on my social a lot recently because of the work he's doing with the orphanages and the sewing centers and all the great stuff that he's got there. And we began to talk, and it was funny because Sam was watching all of my videos on Empire, and he would sit there and he'd have these conversations with me. He would then I would see these massive spikes every time I'd leave Mexico. And so I've been down there 2 or 3 times, and I realized that his greatest points of growth were always in proximity to my presence. It became very real to me that it's not just about the monetary gift. Like, it's about the gift of the knowledge and skills that I have in my life that actually created all this in the beginning, and I've kind of exited from, but now I'm starting to participate more in. And so this year I've set aside 4, dates to go to the foreign field to spend them with our partners. I've been getting on Zoom calls late at night with them and, overseas, just trying to instill more into them, because I am seeing the fruit of time. Now time, when it's so limited for me, has such a greater impact than the money. And it's funny, I think if you ask, obviously they all know that they need the resources, the money to do that, but it's like they are so gracious and grateful when I will take a moment and explain how to grow something or how to build something or how to build it properly.
But I would love to hear your thoughts on the selfish nature of giving. Because at one point you realize the more you give, the more you get.
Yeah.
And any thoughts you might have on that?
Yeah, I think selfishness can be a cancer. Selfishness is one of those topics that I really struggle with, because I find a lot of selfish people in the world, and I so admire selflessness, people that just give. The problem is like, I think it's a journey, and it's like, I think you start off selfish. I think you move into selfless acts, and then the more selfless acts you give, then there's like a higher level of selfishness that then occurs, because you realize that my contribution is the greatest fulfillment. It's I get the most out of it. It's the giver is always the greatest receiver. It's the person who's willing to give is always the one who gets the most. And once you realize that, you begin to architect your life and your world to constantly, whether it's a dopamine hit of, giving and feeling so excited about it, or it's just understanding how much more enriched your life is because of that sacrifice or that gift or that donation, that you begin to architect your life in that way. So, it is interesting because it's this weird dichotomy. You end up at the end now being more selfish, and the selfishness, though, in providing such service to humanity, I think is the only selfishness that's actually okay. I think it's so important to give, with the motive of giving, right? Pure giving, selfless giving, allowing the benefits to still come to you, but keeping your motives pure. And I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to look at the areas of your life that you do have poverty in. Choose to like dissect down your life. And I think for me, it's this intentional choice of, I can give only so much time, but I will give that time. And in that, because I'm giving out of my poverty, it seems to align my motives correctly. Oftentimes, if I just give money, someone walks into the office and they're raising money for a school, or they're doing the latest walkathon or whatever it is. It's so easy for me to just, my motive is oftentimes I need my time back. So here, just let me give you money so that I can have my time back. Or, I have to be very, very careful to then not take that next step, which is then align my motives and say, well, I'm only doing this because I feel great about it. I think oftentimes if I dissect down my poverty, the areas I really struggle to give in because I have very little of, it's really hard to give selfishly when you have very little to give it of. That widow's mite, I don't think she was being selfish in the moment. I think her motive was pure. And I think that was the intent of the stories. She gave out of her poverty, and, her desires were pure. She was giving something because I believe she believed in the cause.
There is a point where you cannot give to everyone. You cannot give everything. Is there a clear cut, or can you articulate how you filter out what you give to, what you don't give to? Because if you ran around and gave time to everyone, you would
Yeah.
have zero time.
Yeah. I think many people believe that you can't give to everyone. And while I may not be able to give a resource to everyone, the resource that we all have endless amounts of is kindness. I may not be able to give my time, but I can be kind. I can show them a smile. I can show them gratitude. I can thank them. I can be kind and open to them. I may not have minutes or hours to give to someone, but I can be kind. And so what I do is I practice on being intentional about my time. And when I give that to someone, it is about their potential growth. It's about their potential, the impact I'm going to make. I want everything that I do to have impact, whether it's $1 or a minute. I want it to have impact, and I'm measuring that impact that it potentially can make to basically prioritize where I put my minutes and their deposits, right, for greater return. However, that doesn't mean that I push everyone else out of my life, and only intentionally. I can still provide endless amounts of kindness and gratitude to them, and I think that that still makes an impact. One of our partners went to Pakistan to meet with our regional director, and he's been one of our big donors, and we've been a part of kind of doing stuff together in Pakistan. And he had a desire to go up into the northern regions. In the northern regions, it's a really, really dry, arid desert region where they make bricks. That's the primary source of income. What I didn't know about it, and what he found out and began to report back to us about, was that every person that worked at the brick factory was actually enslaved. And I'd heard of the debtors' prisons in Pakistan. I'd heard about the debtors' prisons that enslaved people. They, would take a loan and they would then create a debt, and if they couldn't repay, they would be enslaved, and not just them, but their families, their children. And then what we realized, we began to dive into it, was that not only were they being enslaved, but they were being enslaved for generations. There are people there that have been enslaved for 3, 4, 5 generations because of a debt that a great-grandfather couldn't repay. And so it's a system that's built to perpetuate slavery. And the most amazing thing is that these people can be set free for dollar amounts as low as $400 or $500, an entire family. And then the brick factory owners, the slave owners, actually encourage them to have children, because the way that this is set is they'll never be able to work off their debt no matter how much they work. And if their children, if they continue to perpetuate and have children, then the children are enslaved, and they always have a workforce that's building bricks. We found a family there. The man's name was Sufjan. He was the very, very first one that we paid to have him freed. But just like the Emancipation Proclamation that went out after the Civil War, I've read documents that said over 70% of slaves resisted freedom because they didn't know what they would do on the other side of freedom. At least there they had a warm bed, they had some food, they had some provision. Sufjan began to resist a little bit as well, because what would he do on the other side of it? So we realized that even if we wanted to free slaves in Pakistan, we had to have a better system to allow them to find, sustenance and provision on the other side of it. And so with this very first family, there were 6 children, and Sufjan and his wife, that we were able to free. Cost about $3,000 to free the entire family of 8. But we decided, after we talked to him, that we would buy him a little motorcycle taxi. So we bought him a motorcycle taxi so that he could begin to provide for his family. And then we bought his wife a sewing machine and taught her to sew. This family is, they're amazing people. And they're so grateful for what we've done for them. But it created a path for us to allow us to really begin to look into how do we free more slaves. So Christmas time last year, we actually freed 17 women with a ton of children. I think there was over 40 children that were tied to these women. And we started a little sewing center there. This is our 3rd sewing center we've created, and we buy them all sewing machines, teach them to sew. They come in a group area and they learn to sew, and then they can go out, and there's plenty of work that they can have. And then with that sewing machine, they can create enough, revenue for their family to live. And it's this epidemic to me, but it's what's amazing to me is that there are people still in our world that live at the behest of someone else. They have no control of their life. To sit here in America and we have complete freedom, we argue about what's free, what's not free, and I'll take you to a place that's not free. I'll take you to a place that you don't have a choice. You don't get to live your own life. You don't get to make your own decisions. So while sometimes we think it's bad here, pales in comparison to what's going on around the world. But to watch a family like Sufjan's that now have true freedom, now have the ability to create for themselves, have the ability to make life on their own terms, what I find is how gracious and grateful they are, and their willingness to go back and help others. Their desire is to help teach others. It's like when you are freed, true freedom and true gratitude turns you around, and you just want to help someone else. And we're creating a movement there of people who want to free others. And it's wild because for $500 up to $3,000, you can free an entire family. And then for another $2,000 to $3,000, we can give them a livelihood. And we're buying grinders, and we're buying sewing machines and motorcycle taxis, and really trying to create this whole movement of entrepreneurs who are out there providing for themselves. The wildest thing though was we've been talking to the brick factory owner, and I want to do something massive there. And I'm really intentionally kind of thinking about it, praying about it. I'd like to buy the whole brick factory. There's 700 families that are enslaved. And if you could buy a brick factory for $1 million that frees 700 people and turn around and give them, I could actually just pay them a good wage for actually making the same bricks. To me, that would be one of the greatest accomplishments I could do in life. And so we're actively trying to work on it. But families like Sufjan's they're all over northern Pakistan by the thousands. And unfortunately, that's where the world is. When you get outside of our own borders, there are a lot of people that are enslaved. And there are a lot of people that can't make decisions and choices on their own. And I think that's the greatest impact we can give to anyone is freedom. Yeah, as you visit these families, what you realize is the conditions are deplorable. It's in the desert. They don't have sanitary water. They don't have decent living conditions. They're living on dirt floors. As a father, I think I resonated with Sufjan so much because the guilt he felt over his family being in a situation that he was in, and he couldn't get out of it. And so not only are they living on dirt floors, his children are malnourished. He has, children from 14 down to 3 or 4, and all of them are working. All of them are under the same conditions. The slave driver, the person that's running the factory expects the same out of his 5-year-old son as he does the dad. The 5-year-old son has no choice but to work. The mother, his wife, who you as a husband want to protect, she's under the same conditions. They get beat, they get taken advantage of. Oftentimes, there's a lot of stories of sexual molestation. They're looked at as animals. The kids, the dad, the mom, there is no hope for them either. And so they have to give themselves to this lifestyle where, could you imagine going to this place knowing that you can't save your family, you can't change it, and your wife is getting beat, and your children are getting, unbelievable things done to them. The girls are being pushed to convert in certain religions. They're being impregnated early. It's an unbelievable sight. And these people are taken advantage of at a level that we cannot even comprehend. To be there and see it in person draws you to just unbelievable sadness. I don't know if I've ever been to a place in my life where I just felt helpless and hopeless and sad. And that's what I felt. And I felt like I have to do something. And how do you pick one? There's 7. This one brick factory out of dozens and dozens of brick factories has 700 families. Not one family. We freed one family. We freed 15, 16, 17 women, but there are hundreds. And they look at you with such longing and desire, and you just know on their faces that they're thinking, pick me,
You hear the term, you can't put a price on someone's life, but you said it was $700, or how much to free someone?
Yeah, you do hear that phrase. You can't put a price on someone's life, but these lives are somewhere between $500 and $3,000, depending on the size of the family and depending on the debt, But it's rigged. The system's rigged against them. No matter how hard they work, you, your family, everybody could work countless hours, 10, 11, 12, 15-hour days, making bricks, moving sand, nasty conditions. It's dirty, it's dusty, it's horrible. These kids have coughs, they have dirt in their lungs. I mean, it's bad. And the price of that life is $500, $700, $1,000. It's unbelievable. For me, the easiest thing to do is just to take the 700 people, figure out how much it cost, go raise the money, set them free. But I think that where I'm finding the ability to give out of my poverty is to care enough to go look at it, to bring the story back. This is a problem that needs to be shown to the world, not just solved for a moment. That problem will still exist. If I paid for 700 families freedom and I come up with the money to pay for it, because if you think about it, like if every family's $3,000, like we could raise the money. We could get actively, but there's another 700 that's right next door and another 700 right next door and another 1,000 right next door. Like it's endless, and they will continue to enslave more people because the system is broken. And for me, the poverty I have is time, like getting to Pakistan, spending time there, making videos to make sure that the government's aware of it. Somehow we have to expose this on a national level, both in Pakistan and in the US, or things don't change. It's not the problem that has to change, it's the policy. And for us, I'm on a mission to change the policy, and that's going to take time. But if you look at the life of a Sufjan or 700 people, like their lives deserve the investment of my time. And that's how I can give out of my poverty.
Hearing that story is incredibly moving. And to hear that it takes so little to make such a big impact on people's lives. My question for you, and maybe as the listener, is if I wanted to help, if I wanted to support this effort, what can I do right now?
Yeah. I think there are two ways. Obviously, we provide avenues for people to go with us, and you can always find out about those trips at impactothers.com. Or you could go to one of our projects, and if you go to impactothers.com, there's projects listed there. Projects like freeing slaves in Pakistan. There are people that are in the same plight and situation in India and other places in the Middle East, as well as orphans, feeding centers, clean water projects, businesses, so on and so forth. So Impact Others is the epicenter of all that we do. And at minimum, go to Impact Others social media pages and share what we're doing and let the world know.
If I go to Impact Others, I can just give. I can choose like a project to give to.
Yes.
So I could choose the Pakistan one.
Yeah, you can choose whatever is on your heart. I like allowing the people that want to be participatory to actually go there and make a choice, and then we'll communicate back with you about those projects and the progress we're making.
Is there a minimum? Is there a maximum? Like,
no.
Is there a threshold where like if I give this much, I know I get a lot?
I think there's. That's the constant question is like, if I only give $10 or $20, does it actually make a difference? And the reality of it is yes. Yes, you can give $500 or $1,000. You can buy a well yourself. And if that is something that you're so inclined to do, we would love to have a donor like that. But I'm so appreciative of those that are just willing to try it. And to me, that's what I want, is I'd rather have the masses see the value and give $10, because $10 goes a long way. The average meal that we serve in South America right now is 83 cents. You can feed a child. And with that feeding, we also give education. For a child that we have in orphanages, the average cost is about $40 a month to take care of that child. It's like $10, $20, $30 goes a long way in our world because we are serving the masses and we're doing it in a very efficient way. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I really appreciate it. If you do have a desire to give, or you want to make a difference in someone's life, maybe you want to give out of your poverty or abundance, you can go to impactothers.com and you can find ways to give. And you can also find ways to go. Thanks so much for being a part of the podcast and for listening today. I'd love to connect with you further, and you can connect with me on social media at Eddie Wilson Official on any of the social media channels.